make no secret about the fact that I am a huge reality TV fan, and as any good fan will tell you, the blueprint for reality TV as we know it is Survivor. The show truly changed television, and this year it celebrates its 50th season.
Everybody in my business wants the Oscar. It's like, you're losers. Like, I want to win Survivor.
Now I'm joined today to talk about the legacy of Survivor with two big fans, Jael Richardson and Ashley Ray, and former Survivor contestant and Canadian Omar Zaheer. Welcome to Commotion.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, Jael, now for those who've heard of Survivor but maybe never caught the bug, tell us, how did this franchise first come to be?
Okay, well, if you haven't heard of it, where have you been? Is my first
It's been on for 50 seasons, so that's a good point.
I mean, I started watching this when I was in university because it started in 2000, but it's actually based on a Swedish television series called Expedition Robinson. And basically, Mark Burnett paired up with the guy who created Expedition Robinson, and they came up with this idea to kind of inspired by, and I have to mention this because it's a book and I'm a book person, Lord of the Flies, sort of send people off to an island and survive. That's
and if you've read Lord of the Flies, not exactly a happy ending. And very briefly, Jael, what are the basic rules of the game when you're playing Survivor?
Yeah. So the premise, the slogan is outwit, outplay, outlast. And, you talk about it being this competition reality show that kind of set things in motion. And so the premise is that 16 to 20 people are thrown into an island with very little, sometimes no food, sometimes very little food. And they're forced to compete to determine sole survivor. I think one of the key premises that's important to understand in terms of the dynamic is that it starts in teams, various sizes of teams over the years, various configurations of teams, and then it eventually goes into an individual competition. And so there's that premise of like, how do you survive teams? And then how do you survive one-on-one to become ultimately the sole survivor and win $1 million?
I love it. Well, Omar, you were actually a contestant on this show. Very, very exciting. You're even wearing your Survivor, I don't know what you call it, bandana buff, the Survivor buff around your neck, which I love.
Omar, come on over. Woo, good job, Omar.
Thank you. I never thought I'd be next to you.
Really? No, you didn't think so?
You surprise yourself out here. You don't know what you're capable of until you have to do it.
Tell us, what was it about the series that first resonated with you before you became a contestant?
Yeah, so I was 9 years old when the first season aired, and that's when I started watching. But if you think about it, people are social creatures. You know, every aspect of our everyday life, work, the grocery store, the gym, family, friends, strangers, you have social interactions every single day. And you always wonder, if you're in a group of 3 friends, are you the third one? Are you the first or second one? We all want to be loved and accepted by other people. And Survivor, it amplifies that because you can vote somebody out. And so I think that that's what's so relatable. If you think about the Olympics, if you're not really invested in that sports or Team Canada's chances or whatever your nation is, or the love of the sport, you're not going to necessarily watch it. But everybody who watches Survivor can relate to it in some way because it's a social game and every day is a social game.
I love that. I've actually never thought about it in that way, so it's very interesting that you say that. Ashley, you're a newer fan of Survivor. What drew you in initially?
Yeah, I also was about 9 years old when it premiered. I remember my mom being very into it, but it didn't feel like my show. I guess I had America's Next Top Model and Project Runway to watch. It didn't fully click with me. And it wasn't until season 47, my friend John Lovett actually was on the show. And I was like, well, I know someone. Okay, this is a reason to watch. He only made it one episode, but I kept watching the season and I was back in. I was also watching Traitors, and they pull a lot of people from Survivor. So to really understand their gameplay, I was like, I got to go back. I got to learn about these Survivor people because they're so great on Traitors.
Yes. I mean, I was in high school when Survivor first aired. We're all revealing our ages here, so I guess I'll join in too.
Exactly.
And And I loved the first season, but then after a couple of seasons, I took a long break, and I've just rejoined for the 50th season because I got looped into a fantasy league. But I also got it back in because of Traders. And Jael, you are similarly a longtime fan, but you also took a break. So what happened?
Yeah, I love how you put long on there. I'm like the OG auntie in here. It's like, okay, I get it. No, I watched religiously. I watched in my dorms. I'm the old one. And we watched as floor mates, and then we watched as housemates. And when I came home, I kept watching it, and I was really quite intensely following each season. I knew the characters. I knew the storylines. I knew their families. I cried every family episode. And I think what really changed for me is I was also very active on social media and seeing the way the discourse from the show translated into social media, seeing some of the patterns that started to emerge in terms of who got voted out first and how clubs and alliances formed and didn't form, kind of started to wear on me, I think, a little bit. I stopped watching around 2022. And that was when a lot of stuff was also going on in the world. And you would see it on Survivor, and then you'd see it in social media. And it started to really bug me on on an everyday level. And I think that's what really took me away from the show for a while, was sort of recognizing some of the patterns we see in everyday life played out on a show I love and that I saw as entertainment and started to see, I think, a little bit differently.
Like there were toxic elements that were prevalent on social media that you were seeing reflected in the show.
Yeah, or things that happened on the show that reflected toxic behaviors, women being treated a certain way, racial lines being drawn. They did a season where it was divided based on race. And so you saw these really tricky conversations happening. And then in social media, you'd see people just like, who cares? And there was like, you're just wanting more for people and seeing the same things happening in your everyday life that are happening on this show and being talked about in a way that's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up watching the show as a kid, I had to look up to players like Jervis, who was Black, and that was like a connection, and Ethan, who was Jewish, who couldn't eat the ham either. But I never really saw somebody who was like brown or Muslim. And so I'm trying to pull into these things to make connections, but it's still not exactly the same. And so you do wonder, like, why don't we belong there, And so now that they have a diversity initiative to include other stories, I think that means a lot to kids out there who now can see somebody in themselves on the screen and know that they belong. So I think they're trying to make changes, but the response to that is not always positive. But I think that that's been true from the very first season, where they were covering topics like children out of wedlock, gay people, and, being two Black people amongst a cast of all white people, that people weren't ready to receive those conversations then either. But Survivor's always been about change and social progression, I think.
I mean, I do think there's a huge whole conversation to be had about how social media and fans change and reflect what's happening on reality TV, but that's a different conversation. But, I feel like we can't really talk about the legacy of Survivor without playing some of its most memorable moments. This is a clip from the very first season, and it gets down to two finalists, Kelly Wigglesworth and Richard Hatch. The contestants that lost get to decide the winner of the show. And that's when contestant Sue Hawk said this about the two finalists.
This island is pretty much full of only two things: snakes and rats. And in the end of Mother Nature, we have Richard the snake, who knowingly went after prey, and Kelly, who turned into the rat that ran around like the rats do on this island, trying to run from the snake. I feel we owe it to the island's spirits that we have learned to come to know, to let it be in the end the way Mother Nature intended it to be, for the snake to eat the rat.
Wow. I mean, talk about drama. Jael, how big of a deal is that moment in Survivor fan lore?
I think it's a huge moment because even before the days of going viral, it went viral. It was the thing that people talked about. It was the thing that kind of defined how that final voting would go, people would come up and sort of try to be like that moment, that Sue moment. I think as a writer, I just have to say it's epic because, you know, the language, the metaphor, the way she's like dramatically pausing is it's so entertaining. And that's really a huge part of Survivor. On the like wah side, I think it's also unfortunate because it's a woman ultimately tearing down another woman to allow you know, a guy to win, and that creates a certain dynamic that like, oh, here we go viral, women eating women, like literally tearing them apart. To elevate a man to the championship or to win the sole survivor. I think that's what's hard about it. On one level, you want to celebrate it and it's great and it's epic, but it does reflect what we were talking about. Some of these patterns that we see in everyday life showing up on this really incredibly entertaining reality TV show.
Yeah, I mean, and Richard Hatch was just like the guy that you kind of love to hate. You're like, okay.
Yeah. First villain.
First villain, like our first true reality TV villain. It's so true.
Yeah.
Now, Omar, things get very real on this show, right? Like, speaking of Lord of Flies, like you guys are out there and you're put through it. You know, this season contestant Kyle Fraser had to be evacuated because of an injury to his Achilles tendon. In season 2, you saw burnt flesh literally falling off someone's hands when he fell into a campfire. What was the challenge that really tested you the most as a contestant?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people forget about the environment because it is a lot about strategy now. Living, like I had never camped one day in my life.
Oh my goodness.
Living completely outside, nothing, your comforts from home, family, friends, your warm bed, you know, everything is deprived of you, food, water. You have to collect everything to like even have fire. And so the rain was the worst though. When it rains, like here, if I get my sock wet, my day's ruined.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, we can escape here if you're lucky and fortunate to be able to go into the gas station or into a car. You don't have to be in the rain, but stuck there for hours and hours and hours. And no matter how good your shelter is, you're always going to be wet. And some people have to go through that in this world. Like that's crazy. And on top of that, the environmental, nutritional, there's also the psychological warfare that's going on. You see it with Susan and Kelly, how intense and real it is. And to achieve your dream, you have to destroy somebody else's and then make them vote for you to win. So combining those two things together is just, it's electric TV.
It's testing. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, straight up, I could not do it. Like, let's just be real. The very first day I'd be like, no, I'm out. A rat touched my foot. No, thank you. If you're just listening, I'm Amil Niazi sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. We're talking about the legacy of the iconic reality series Survivor with Jael Richardson, Ashley Ray, and former Survivor contestant Omar Zaheer. So let's hear another memorable clip from Survivor. This is an exchange between the last two contestants standing in season 8, Rob Mariano, a.k.a. Boston Rob, and Amber Burkich, just before the winner was decided. And this is what Boston Rob said to the last person standing in the way of him winning the $1 million final prize.
Amber, you came a long way in this crazy game. I've seen you at your highest high and your lowest low. And between it all, we worked together as a team to accomplish so much. It was really crazy, and in the end, I ended up falling in love with you. You're the most amazing person I've ever met in my entire life, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you.
Well, I mean, as anyone who's now watching Traitors knows, Boston Rob has gone on to become one of the most memorable reality TV contestants of all time. And Amber and Rob are still married, by the way. So it worked out. Worked out for both of them. They shared the $1 million in the end. Ashley, what do you think makes for a compelling contestant? You know, you love reality TV. You know what it takes to like make someone stand out. So what do you think are the qualities that makes for a really compelling contestant on Survivor?
I think you have to be willing to be the snake. I think a lot of times we want to be the fan favorite and we want to be lovable, but you really, I think, have to be willing to go there to be evil. And that's what, at least what I find compelling. I love Richard Hatch. I love the people who just go, I'm here to be the bad guy because I'm here to win, and it works out for them. But I do think it is more difficult for women to take that path. I think it's kind of thrown back at us. There's a double standard. And so I think the women that I really enjoy are the ones who know how to manipulate and work the game. I love Cirie. I love Poverty. Also, you can tell I've watched the seasons with people from Traders, but I feel like they do such a wonderful job of seeing how people are viewing them with a bias and manipulating that. They understand. Cirie can be like, oh, people kind of see me as this figure they can trust, and she will use that against them. And I love that. I think those people, they're there to win.
Jael, who's your favorite Survivor contestant of all time?
Well, I think Cirie has been mentioned. She's one of my favorites of all time. I also like Sandra. She was really good at just making sure she was never the person people were talking about. And that became a really interesting strategy. As Ashley said, I'm really curious about how the women navigate things, because I think it's a little bit trickier. You have some of the dudes can just sort of strength their way through everything. I'm a valuable person and then I can win. And the women have to kind of figure out the relationships. I'm really compelled by characters who are really good at reading people. So one of the things Boston Rob was fantastic at was actually knowing when people were coming for him just by the way they responded to a question he would ask. And he wouldn't confront or fight too much. He would sort of be like, oh, and he'd walk away and she's like, she's voted me out. I'm using my idol. And he would just really be able to read people so well. That's something that really compelled me. But Cirie and Poverty are some of my favorites because of the Black Widow season. The ability of those women to pair together and navigate, get all the men voted off, even when they won challenges and had immunity, was exceptional television and just like a triumph of women as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I love that. Omar, what do you think? What makes a really good Survivor contestant?
I think adaptability is the most important thing. I think that you have to be able to put yourself aside to some extent and look at what other people want. What makes them motivated? What are they thinking? Think about the game from their perspective and be able to meet them where they're at rather than having them meet you where you're at. If you can be flexible and meet people where they need to be met, then you can maximize on your relationships. But if you can only operate in one way of like being in charge or whatever it may be, then you're probably going to get cut. So I think that it really is about adaptability and social maneuverability and connecting with people.
Now, there have been 2 Canadian winners of Survivor so far, Omar. And, I think that's like pretty admirable. Is there anything you think that gives Canadians like an advantage being on the show, or maybe even a disadvantage?
Yeah, well, Canadians have only been allowed on since season 39. And so each season, there really is maybe 1, 2, and maximum 3 on my season Canadians that were allowed on. So you're really getting the cream of the crop because we're competing for very fine spots, which is why season after season, whether we win or not, Canadians knock it out of the park. Plus, we have that underestimation. People think we're super nice and we're super polite, and that all can be true, but we can still grab the knife and stab you in the back. And my fellow Canadian stabbed me in the back and I didn't see it coming, So I think that's the secret to success is underestimation.
I love that. Yes. We may be nice, but we will take the last coconut. I don't know. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen Survivor. Jael, as you start watching the 50th season, at its best and at its worst, what do you think Survivor tells us about ourselves?
I think Omar sort of talked about it at the beginning in terms of what we look for in terms of belonging. I think it's a really incredible, that first episode where they get all out of the boats and they're getting onto their teams and their tribes and they're like sizing each other up. That's such a natural experience in any place, a workplace, a team, a school. You're sort of sizing up who else is there and where you fit. And I think that moment is really powerful and seeing how that evolves. I think that that's what's beautiful about Survivor. I think on the flip side, what's kind of negative is it also reveals those perceptions, those misperceptions that come very early. We see patterns of women, people who are perceived to be weaker, being voted off very early, being targeted very early. we see folks who are marginalized and very strong being relied on the team stage, and then being seen very early as threats in the individual stage. And I think these are patterns we see in everyday life. We see women trying to navigate relationships, trying to win the way the men win and being punished for it, trying to win a different way and being seen as not strong or not as clever as the men. And so there's all these ways, there's queerness and disability that have been represented and misrepresented through the show that I think have provided a bit of a lens for what we see play out in everyday life as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Omar, as a former contestant, how do you think your experience on the show has shaped your perspective of the series today?
Yeah, I mean, my experience on the show was amazing. I was treated super well. It's like the crew environment's like a family. And so it's great to see that behind the scenes, the people working on the show are working just as hard to create the product that we enjoy. And it's like an ethical behind the scenes product, to be honest. And I think what I love about it is that, again, Survivor pushes the envelope of social and society because it is a social game. And so they're not afraid necessarily to show things that other TV shows won't. And I think that some of that reveals some ugliness, but from that ugliness can be growth. And if it's not there, it won't grow. And so I think they're open to that. And then finally, like, to the last 50 seasons, you have to be able to switch it up. And they have changed. This is the first season, season 50. The cast is bigger than ever. What are they going to do? It's going to be different than everything before. And that's how you stay on the air for so long. So I'm excited not only to see what comes in for season 50, but after that as well, because who knows when the end is?
Yeah, who knows when the end is? I mean, Omar, I also want to ask about Jeff Probst. So, like, we can't talk about the show without talking about this host that's been there since season 1. And that's quite rare, honestly, for a host to be beloved and, such a core part of the show for that long. So what was it like to actually be there with him? And is he as, like, likable in real life as he is on air?
He seems so charming.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff he's such a professional. He's so good at what he does that, he does have to keep some professionalism between us when he's filmed or being a host. But when you do get glimpses of it, I would say that there's two things. One is that he's a lot weirder in a good way than you would think. Like he's quirky. He does weird rhymes, and I like that because, like, be yourself. And I think that that's not something we see on the show. There's little glimpses of it here and there now, but it wasn't always that way on the show. And the other thing is he is really kind. Like, I think he actually does really care about us, and you can see that in moments when it's really raining down hard and he's like, I know this is tough, but you just gotta get through this and then it'll be better and you'll learn something from it. And it did seem like he was nurturing. And you don't necessarily know, what they're going to be like behind the scenes. So I was impressed.
I will also say he's done an exceptional job over these years navigating really tricky conversations. And we've seen in other reality shows that hasn't happened, that they've lost hosts because they couldn't keep up with the kinds of conversations that were happening or the kinds of things that needed to be discussed. And I think Jeff Probst has always been quite tactical and strong at getting the questions and getting at it without becoming the question, without becoming part of the problem or part of the discourse. And that's a real skill too.
Yeah, for sure. So Ashley, as the new fan on the block, do you think Survivor has what it takes to keep audiences coming back for another 5, 10, potentially even 50 more seasons?
Yes. I mean, like I said, I did come back because I knew someone, but he was gone right away. I kept watching because it was so good. I didn't realize how much the show has grown. I think those sort of, that first season I ever watched where it was new TV, just sort of doing whatever they kind of could to figure Survivor out. And now it's just become a very, very well-oiled machine that I just want to see what happens with new contestants, who they bring back. I'm going back to understand the full lore of Boston Rob. There's just so much fun to it. And even just online, it feels like a community of, okay, where do I go next? What season should I do next? And it's fun. I really love it. I love the little Survivor community. And I think I'm in for the next 50 years. They got me.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. We're all going to be watching from like our orthopedic comfort beds. Okay, before we go, I want to get your recommendations, something we can spend a little bit of time with this weekend, a TV show, a movie, maybe some music. Jael, let's start with you. What's your recommendation?
Well, I'm going to go with a book because I have to represent for the writers. I'm going to recommend reading Sharon Balla's Good Guys, which is a novel about a not-for-profit organization. It's called Good Guys because the question is, who are the good guys? What does it mean to do right and do well in the world? And that's what I'll recommend, Sharon Balla's Good Guys.
Great. And Ashley, what about you?
I am going to recommend Neighbors. It is a new docuseries on HBO Max by the Safdie brothers. It looks at different neighborly disputes across the great country of America. And if you want to see how insane we are, it is a beautiful depiction of people fighting over fences, beaches, anything you can imagine. And does it make me proud of my country? No, but it is very, very entertaining.
I'm obsessed and I get so angry and I literally want to fight half of the people on the show. Very good recommendation. Omar, you get the last 30 seconds. What's your recommendation?
I'll give two. One is The Hunting Party, which is kind of similar to Criminal Minds. I didn't know about this show, but it's pretty good. And then The Well is a Canadian-made documentary, or not a documentary, a Canadian-made thriller about water access, and it was so good. So I would recommend checking that out, and that's supporting local. So.
Oh, I love that. Okay, great recommendations. Thank you so much for this. Really appreciate your time. Jael Richardson is the author of Gutter Child and the Stone Thrower. She's also the executive director of the Festival of Literary Diversity in Brampton, Ontario. Ashley Ray is a comedian and podcaster based in LA. And Omar Zaheer is a former Survivor contestant and reality show player. And that is it for the podcast today. I'm Amil Niazi sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. Thanks for listening.